There we go. All right, all right, all right. It's Monday, February 15th, 2021. I'm Steven Sersky. Thank you very much for joining me. This is episode number 20 of my podcast. And today I have another guest with me, Anna Bass. She is a fellow English teacher, someone I met back in, before I came to China. We met in Montreal, where we were both doing an intensive course called the CELTA program. And what the CELTA is basically a high level certificate for English teachers who want to continue teaching in the ESL industry, either in their home countries or overseas as well. And so we spent 5 weeks together, not living together, but going to the same school in Montreal. And then she basically moved to New York, not right afterwards, but closely there and afterwards. And then I moved to China. She has then since then started her own company, which I faintly recall talking to her about this when we were in Montreal. She had the idea, but she may not have had the specifics just yet. So instead of staying in Montreal, she moved to New York, and she moved back to Moscow, and then runs camps from Moscow. She goes to New York with a group of kids, and for 3 weeks, they all live together, and they basically not only learn English, but they also get to experience New York. And then along the way, they also get to make a creative project, such as a short film or even a theater production of sorts. So I thought it'd be great to talk to her because she is an expat from Russia. She's an English teacher from a non-English speaking country, and she also has quite high-level qualifications. She's moved around the world quite a bit too. She seems to be a language savant as well, or at least very good with languages, seeing as though not only does she know her mother tongue of Russian and now English, but she's also studied Chinese, she's studied German and a few other languages along the way. She used to study in China. And as a result of studying in China, get this, she then got a call to work on a movie set in China. So we talk about her history of language study, Chinese, and then her subsequent move into filmmaking, and then finally her becoming or setting up shop basically a bit more in New York. I think you guys are going to like this conversation. Thank you very much for joining me, and let's hear what Anna has to say. Anna Bass, she's here. Where do we begin? I guess you're in New York. I'm in Beijing. The last time we met was in Moscow. That was 4 years ago. But I think a lot of people would actually be wondering, what's it like in New York right now?
Right now it's snowy, which is unusual for New York. I mean, it's pretty cold winter here. It's quite empty. I mean, no tourists. It's strange. What else? Things are still closed. Yesterday, our indoor dining was open, which is great. And what else? Well, New York has changed a lot. I mean, it's not the city people know right now.
Okay, so because I saw that news article that in-house dining, whatever it is, just started on Friday, like last Friday.
Yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
Yesterday.
Right, so that was Saturday, right?
Yeah, Saturday.
So then, when you say it has changed so much,
it has actually. But
in
it's been
what
a
way?
year, so now it's much emptier because before New York was full of people and tourists, like overcrowded even. But now it's really, the streets are empty because there are no tourists. And lots of people who are New Yorkers actually have left to other states because the schools have been closed all this time, almost a year. And so if you live in New York in a small apartment with kids who don't go to school, and New York is pretty expensive, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So lots of people have left, or people who have, let's say, houses, they live in the houses right now because it doesn't, make much sense. Midtown Manhattan, which is office, mostly it's offices, it's pretty empty because nobody goes to the offices yet. So it looks a little bit strange, but at the same time, I'm kind of used to this New York, so it will be strange, I guess, when everything is open and crowds of people are out there again. So it's also enjoyable, maybe, in a way.
Where are they going? Like, what states are they fleeing to?
I don't know exactly. I know that lots of people went to upstate New York or anything around New York, like New Jersey. Some people have moved to other states. I don't know exactly which states, but just where they think they could. Because most of the people who can work, they work remotely still. I mean, of course, there are essential workers and there are people who work like in restaurants. I don't know. They go to actual work, but all the people who worked in the offices, financial sector, business, I don't know, banking, IT, they all work from home.
Really? So Wall Street's closed.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Wow. What about Fifth Avenue or whatever? What's that expensive shopping district? It's Fifth Avenue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It has been throughout the year. It has had its ups and downs. I mean, there were some when was it? Before the elections, they boarded up the whole Fifth Avenue because they were afraid of some protests and stuff, which
Mm.
did not happen, but it was an interesting experience to walk along Fifth Avenue, which is kind of, all these beautiful stores. Their windows are boarded up, which changes the whole outlook.
Jesus.
Um, yeah, so New York has its own, challenges this year, I would say. What else has happened in New York? Lots of, like in Soho, for example, which is a district with lots of designer stores. Lots of stores have closed because they were not, like, there are no people to buy things
Uh-huh.
anymore, at least at the moment. So there are a lot of empty places. The rent has gone considerably down. No, I
Oh,
mean, considerably considering New York, and not considerably, but somewhat down, because also all the theaters and the whole Broadway, all this is closed as well for a year. And all these people who work there, which is a lot of people in New York, like all
yeah.
the actors, um, they left also, I guess. And lots of people shared. In New York, it's very popular, like you live with roommates because it's so expensive. So there were a lot of, and still are in the market, lots of apartments which were not available, let's say, before.
Jeez. How much has rent gone down?
It's difficult to say, but for sure, like up to 20%, I guess.
20%.
It depends. It depends on the, like. Of course, it depends if the apartment is good and good. I mean, neighborhood and everything is ideal, which never happens in New York. All the factors are good. It still will be quite expensive, but still there is a big choice, which was never the case before. Before you had to fight to be approved to live somewhere. Now, I mean, there are more apartments out there in the market, and you don't have to fight.
So there was a Twitter spat between who was it? James Altucher and Jerry Seinfeld. Did you hear about this?
Mm,
Where James Altucher basically
yeah,
said New
he wrote
York
the
City
article
was
that
dead,
York had. Yeah,
and
yeah.
Seinfeld's like, "No, you're a putz." I mean, so from what you're telling me, it's basically New York isn't dead. It's just not very vibrant as it used to
It's
be.
not that. I don't think it will die. I mean, New York is too. It has its own history of, I don't think it's dead. It's just it has changed in the
Mhm.
last year, and I think it will continue changing. And even when the things come to normal, I don't think it will come back right away because it takes some time. But after 9/11, everybody thought, oh, nobody ever is gonna travel, I don't know, by plane or above New York or whatever. I mean, things tend to come back.
Yeah, that's true. But 9/11 was like it almost became a patriotic act to rebuild New York in that sense because it was such a slap in the face. It was like, first of all, how did we let this happen? Second of all, it's like you don't do that to us. And so it was like there was this push, and because I remember people in my hometown, it wasn't so much people that I knew, it was the newspapers were reporting that the firefighters, the police, there were donations. It was everything just came to New York and was supporting that cause of, get people out who need to be taken out and stuff like that, and rebuild what can be rebuilt. So that it was a lot more of it was a North American effort almost to rebuild New York City back then. This time it's like this is a global shutdown of. I mean, it's bizarre. Beijing in contrast, is basically alive. I mean, it's open. I mean, I was at the pub 2 days ago. talking with a guy in Britain, and he was like, "Yeah, everything's shut down here, but Beijing is pretty much open. You have to wear a mask, and we have
Yeah, in New York, everybody wears masks.
right. Do you
People
have
are very,
contact
very.
tracing?
Yeah, it's not consistent. In some places you do, but in some other places you don't. Like yesterday, went to the restaurant. There was no form for contact tracing. In some like in some places, yeah, they make you fill in the form. It's not so consistent. But wearing masks is super. Everybody is wearing masks everywhere, and it's not. It's I don't know. Everybody's doing that.
Yeah. They so when they're contact tracing, what information are they taking down? Is it your passport, your phone number, name?
No, just a name and your phone number. That's it.
That's it? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Here they take down our passport. I mean, now they have it all through digital apps that we have to scan this QR code.
Yeah, you have something like you have to have an app or something. Yeah, I am subscribed to some people who live in Beijing. And how does it work exactly, your system?
So we either use Alipay or WeChat, which are the two
Mhm.
big digital payment systems. If you don't use those, you can download the National Health app, and
Mhm.
then it opens up a QR scanner. So it's like that. The QR code is like what North America never ever. It sort of started in North America and then it just died. And no one used it. But in China, everyone uses QR codes for everything. You scan it, and then it registers. You have a picture of yourself, and then it shows the time that you entered. I'm not sure if it shows the location, but then it also shows whether or not there's any issues, like if that area is a hot district or like a high risk
Mhm.
area. And it's also linked to your most recent nucleic acid test, so that can also show up in the result. So that's the main one that you have to scan. But then there's another one that shows a green arrow.
Mhm.
And the green arrow basically does one of two things. It shows, one, that you haven't been in a high risk location. Number two, you are not uh, considered to be high risk given where you
Mhm.
live or anything like that. So, and that one shows it shows your whole travel itinerary. So if I left to Tianjin or to Zhengzhou, it would show up the exact district that I was in those cities, and so it gives you the whole community name and stuff like that. And if it shows red, that's when the guards at the mall go, no, 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 you can't come
Mhm.
in here. You red man, you cannot be in here. But if you go to the hospital, because if you have to go to the hospital to get an NAT and it shows red, then they get you to fill out another piece of paper with a shared pen, and then you fill out where exactly you were in the last 14 days. And that's that. Then they keep the piece of paper. I don't know what they do with this. It kind of, when everyone's handling the same pen and they take the paper, I go, this isn't this part of the issue of communicating this
Mhm.
disease, but whatever. But yeah, so those are the two main ways. They have this little green arrow, and then they have this other QR code scanner that registers where we are. And you have to do that for every mall, most restaurants. But once you get into a restaurant, to get to most restaurants, you have to go through a mall anyway.
Mhm.
Some of the Chinese shops, they're outside. Some of them are very strict. Some of them aren't. Uh, Depends how busy they are, really, because they're like, if they're super busy, like QR code isn't going to stop that disease. Just come and get your
Mhm.
food and leave, basically.
Mhm.
But
No, here QR codes are now popular in like in restaurants. There are no menus at the moment, and they're all QR codes. So you just
okay.
scan the QR code, and it opens the menu. I guess it's for I don't know, not touching the menu by many people.
Well, menus are dirty. Same with money. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's
That's
just
why a lot of places here are no cash anymore. Like they only take cards.
okay. So is it just credit cards, or has digital payments taken off, like Apple Pay and Google Pay?
They are here. I would not say they're so popular. I think in Russia they're more popular than here, but yeah, they're. Um, like, I mean, they're quite popular, but not as much.
Not as much. Yeah. Here, I mean, everything's digital. I mean, if you give someone cash, they look at it and go, okay, I have to go call my brother-in-law to go to the bank safe to get the change. I mean, it's like who keeps money anymore? It's usually
Yeah,
it's
China
WeChat.
generally, it seems to me it's much more digitalized and much more ahead on this thing. Like New York in many ways is very much behind. Like it was built, I mean, lots of things were built 100 years ago when it was super, super cool. But now, I mean, it's beautiful and I love New York, don't take me wrong. But compared to China, it's the thing of the past, in my opinion, in many,
Yeah,
like many levels.
but I mean, China sort of had a chance to restart itself. I mean, there was a bit more of
Yeah,
a last 100 years gave it an opportunity to start anew, whereas New York just keeps on piling on top, basically.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think with New York, the subway system is sort of the most emblematic of like they just keep building into it or around it. They don't tear it down and rebuild it.
That's the
Whereas
most
Beijing, they
important
just
thing
rebuilt
about
the whole thing.
yeah. Subway here is New York, But New York, it's the place like either you love it or you hate it. I don't think there are people who are, you know, I don't know.
But who
It's
would
a very
hate New York?
I know lots of people who don't like it. It's too crowded, too expensive. It's very like it's way too expensive to live here, and for the amount of money in other states you can get, I mean, you just need to really love New York to live here, or
Yeah.
maybe be born here, or like I don't know, if you have a place to live here, like a house or something, an
Yeah.
apartment.
But you're not originally from New York. So what drew you to New York?
I love New York. I feel it's my kind of place. I don't know. Love is, irrational feeling.
Right.
It's just feels good here. I think I was born in Moscow and grew up in Moscow. Moscow is a big city. So I'm kind of a big city girl by nature. And New York is, I don't know, I cannot say Moscow improved. It would not be the right comparison, but it has a lot of these things which I love in big cities. Rhythm, I mean, not now exactly, but New York was before now and will be after now. So
This
generally,
is an exception, right?
yeah, exception. The pace of big city, lots of people from everywhere culturally. I love that.
Yeah.
And people who have, I think New York is full of very motivated people who want to do something, create something. I don't know, do business. For me, it's important as well.
That's true. There is sort of that desire. Is it a desire to get ahead, or is is it simply an inspiration to I want to do something, whatever it is, like I'm going to do it. And I've always
I think
found
it's
like
both.
Americans are I'm going to do this big. So if I'm going to do it, it's going to be either great success or it's going to be a
Yeah,
catastrophic failure.
yeah. So and New York is more, I don't know, like people, you can, it's a city which never sleeps, really. I mean, and Moscow is the same. And for me, I like this vibe. Like you can meet with people late, or I don't know. There are people in all types of everything. You can find whatever person you want and like make friends and go to parties and meet people. And it's for me, it's great. And I think I love New York architecturally, if you
Yeah,
can say
well, it's a
so.
beautiful city, isn't it?
And it talks to me a lot. I like that it's surrounded by water. I like that it has different neighborhoods and they have their own, character. So,
Wouldn't New York and Moscow, wouldn't they have very similar architecture in some ways? Some of the buildings are similar, that they were built 100 years ago, same sort of that European framework sort of style.
maybe, but not really. Moscow is very different. New York is very tall, and the streets are quite narrow.
Hmm.
Moscow is much lower generally than New York, and the streets are very wide. Moscow has more in common with Beijing, in my opinion, of
Hmm.
this communist architecture, wide streets. Okay, Beijing has changed as well in the last whatever 10 years, a lot. But I mean, originally, Beijing now is ahead of Moscow in terms of how many skyscrapers and modern buildings are. But when I first came to Beijing, which was many years ago, 15 maybe years ago, I saw the Beijing which does not exist anymore, actually.
Right. Yep. A lot of people have said that. I mean, anything
Yeah,
prior to 2008, it's pretty much
yeah, it's
gone.
very different. And that was very much like Moscow, this kind of wide streets with quite low buildings and type of Soviet slash, I don't know, classical architecture. This was there.
Yeah, with Beijing, what was it? I was watching Generation P last night, which you worked on,
Yeah, yeah, I worked.
and
This is my last project in the film industry.
and I was looking at, because that movie is based on this book by Viktor
Yeah.
Pelevin, but some of the scenes there actually are shot in those old. I'm not sure if they're old. I guess they are old, but Soviet style buildings, like the 6 floors,
Mm-hmm.
and like they don't have any elevators or anything like that. And some of those still exist in Beijing, which they basically copied from the
Mm-hmm.
whole
Yeah,
film.
yeah, that's why it felt so much like Moscow. But when I was there first time in Beijing, there were much more of them.
Yeah,
And in Moscow, we still have most of the buildings are like this. So yeah.
yeah.
Oh, it's
Beijing's
interesting.
tore them down.
It's not a very popular movie, and even like even in Russia, I would say, but abroad
Why
specifically.
not?
I don't know. I think it's a great movie actually, and if it was made in American English, it would maybe have been much more popular.
Yeah, because it is. Not only do they speak fast because it's in Russian, but for people who don't know, this movie Generation P is uh, based on this book by Viktor Pelevin, who's a famous author in Russia,
Mm.
and it deals with this copywriter or this guy who becomes a copywriter through like sort of starts and fits at the fall of the USSR. So it was the change in the early '90s. And they basically say like you got to get in on the ground floor here, marketing. The Western brands are going to come, and that's where they start making their money, or they're supposed to try to make their money in that situation. So, but it's kind of bizarre. I have the book in Russian. When I went through Russia, because the last time we met was back in 2017, I think it was. Yep.
Mhm.
That's when I took the train from Beijing to Moscow. I bought it. I bought that book with the idea that I was going to read it, and I still haven't read it because I haven't had time since then. But the lady at the bookshop said, "Yeah, this guy's very famous." She gave me
Mhm.
this book. She's like, "Yeah, it's one of the famous books." And I mean, he's written several books that are famous, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure if
quite a lot.
any.
He's a very prolific writer. He writes one book a year,
Yeah,
basically. So yeah, he's written quite a lot.
and Generation P, I was looking at the because I was wondering because it was one of your was it your earlier credits or your later credits? But in terms of the budget that was spent on the movie and how much it made back, it only made back about 4 million, but it
Mhm.
cost 7. And I
Yeah,
look at that number, I go, and the only reason why it was significant is I go, this is a famous book, a famous author. Why didn't it do better on a global stage? And I just wonder if it just because it was primarily a Russian movie. It was made in Russian for Russians rather than for a global audience. With properly subtitled English or even just English overdub or something like that. So, but
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. Sure.
but you have worked in films. Prior to your life in New York, prior to your life as an ESL teacher,
Yeah,
basically. Now, but you didn't study filmmaking or anything,
no,
and
yeah,
you've brought up Beijing because you've also been to China. So our connection, although it starts in 2014, we have you have treaded where I am now living. Basically, you've been to Tianjin and also Beijing. Uh,
yeah.
did you live in Beijing or it was like a stopover and then you were moving to a different
I
city?
lived in Tianjin for a year because I studied at the university there.
Right.
It was an exchange between Russia and China, and I got kind of a scholarship from Russia,
Oh,
or
nice.
maybe from China. Yeah, so I studied for free, and I was like a foreign student. I studied Chinese, and I got even um, what is it called? Like every month, I got some kind of money from $100. But at those times in Tianjin in 2003 and four, I think I studied there. It was a lot of money. I managed like it was enough for food for
Hmm.
sure, even maybe some cheap clothes, in Chinese markets.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Beijing, I lived in Beijing later when I started working in the film industry, and we had a project. Our pre-production period was in Beijing, so I spent a couple of months there.
Right. And what
Mhm.
project was that, the Mongol project or which one
Yeah,
was
it
that?
was. Yeah, it was my first project in the film industry was a great project, which I still up to now think it was a great movie called Mongol.
That's
Yeah,
a
it was
great
a
movie.
yeah, it's an international kind of co-production about Genghis Khan.
Hmm.
how do you pronounce his name, guys?
Uh,
How
I
we
say
pronounce
Genghis
it.
Khan, but I've heard
Yeah,
Genghis
people
Khan
say Genghis
before.
Khan, some people say Genghis Khan. Yeah, okay, Genghis Khan. And it's yeah, it was my first actually job in the film industry.
And
Uh,
what was your role on that? Because it said production assistant, or at least you're listed as
yeah,
production assistant for a few.
I worked for almost 2 years on this movie because they made it, they showed it over 2 summers in
Mm-hmm.
China. So I was summer one, then a year in between, and then summer two. First, I was invited, I just graduated from university in Russia. And because I could speak Chinese, and then in those old ancient times, not so many people could do it as now. Now Chinese is super popular. I mean, children are learning it in kindergarten. It was not the case then. And I think I got a message from one of the people I studied with in China, because it was a group of us Russian students sent there for who got the scholarship. About 20 people from Russia got the scholarship every year, so I was one of them. And so they asked me, like, do you want to work on the film in China? And I didn't know anything about film industry, zero. Or but I was just out of university. I was like, I graduated in June. It was like July, so I was looking for a job. I said, yeah, sure. I mean, why not? And I went for the first interview, the first and only job interview in my life. And the guy, he was a producer of this movie. He said, "Are you like? Can you speak Chinese?" Asked me. He asked me in Russian. I said, "Yeah, I just a year ago I lived there for a year and I studied Chinese." And he said, "Yeah, can you leave in a week? We need some like translators." I said, "Yeah, sure."
Wow.
And that was my basically. He said, "Do you know like this director, Sergei Bodrov?" I did not know actually the director, though he's quite famous, but I knew his son. His son who died, he was a very famous actor. There were no smartphones, so I could not Google like who Sergei Bodrov was. So
Yeah.
he gave me the script. I came home, like looked on my old, fashioned computer, his name. I was like, "Ma, he's a cool director. Okay, great." And I read the script. The script was amazing. It was very like well written, very strong. I don't know, beautiful text. And I was like, that's interesting. And in a week, I just left and went to work as a translator. And so I arrived in China, and the whole crew, they lived in a hotel in Beijing.
Which hotel?
Uh, I don't remember, and it was somewhere I think around for Ring in those times, but I
Okay.
don't remember the district or anything else. And so I didn't know anything about film industry, so everything was kind of a big adventure. I'm in Beijing,
Yeah.
working in the film industry. There are these people, they're like making costumes, something is happening, I have to translate. So I was just translating for anybody who was there. And then I think it was 1 month of pre-production. It was pretty interesting because it's a period movie, a historical one. So there is a lot of preparation, which involves like reproducing these ancient costumes, lots of research, lots of meeting with historians. Like it's a very interesting process to be inside. And then we were living. So the first year shooting was in Inner Mongolia, in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere, basically. And before we had to leave for our film set, the director said, I don't really know, like maybe you can work as a translator with the sound department guys, like I don't know. And they were French people, but okay, they spoke English as well. I said, whatever. And then I became a translator of the sound department, which was a completely new world for me because I mean, we recorded live sound on the set, and I was translating for them. And the set was basically the steppes of Inner Mongolia,
Yeah.
which is, the most beautiful set I've ever had in the film industry. It's one of a lifetime, opportunity. Yeah. So the shooting was, the first year was quite, we had a lot of international crew. But then the second year, everything changed because I think there was some money issues. And in between the first year shooting, which was like 2 months, I think we shot in Inner Mongolia. And the second year I became personal assistant of Sergei Bodrov. And I worked as his personal assistant. This was very
Oh
interesting. I
wow.
think it's
So you're right
one of
up
the
there in
best
the
movies.
ranks all of a sudden.
Yeah. No, it was very interesting because he's a very interesting person. And I was a very like young, eager to learn the world, I don't know, girl then, young woman. And he took me a lot of times with him, like when he was meeting people and everything, which was about film. And it was very interesting because I was discovering the world which I did not know at all, and there were a lot of interesting, very creative people, and he was full of stories because he lived in Hollywood, and he was one of the directors recently of some Hollywood movie with a budget of like $200 million. Like, he had a lot of experience in life. He has
Yeah.
met people, he has seen things, and he shared this when he had time. Like, he told me stories, and I think in many ways this 1 year of working closely with him maybe made me into, and 1 year in China before that maybe made me personally, because when you're so young, you're very you're not set up yet in your ideas, and when you're so exposed to the world and people in it, that changes a lot of things.
That's quite an experience, though. You go from being a university student on scholarship, and then basically transporting yourself from Moscow to Beijing, foreign country, no cell phones. Like, it's almost obscene to think of life before smartphones and Google Translate, but you did it. You succeeded, and then so that also means that your Chinese was very good once you had graduated. That you had got this offer and was able to translate for production crew.
I wouldn't say it was very good, to tell you the truth, but and they didn't check it when they interviewed me for the job.
Right.
Chinese people rolled their eyes lots of times. I mean, like, why did you take this person from Moscow whose Chinese is not so great when we have all
Right.
these translators whose Russian is great? But I think I learned fast, and also my English was good in those times, and this was important because we had international crew, so I could translate from English into Russian into Chinese. Maybe I was not such a great, not maybe I was not such a great translator, but I had enough of like Chinese in me to go by. And the second year, everything, and the second year, I mean the second year of shooting on this project, everything changed because we had a new producer, Russian company woman, and she said that because I've been on this project for almost a year, and like being just a translator is not enough, and so she gave me a new role of third assistant director.
Okay.
And it was very challenging because I have been on the project working with Sergei personally, and 1 year of shooting where I was a translator, but I did not know yet lots of things about the film industry. Yeah.
And what does an assistant director do?
It depends. I mean, 4DD in America would maybe do different things, but in Russian / Chinese / international version of it, we were two people. Like, the director department had 4 people, I think, on Chinese side, and 2 people on Russian side. So I was responsible for call sheets. It's the thing which is it's like the day schedule which the whole crew gets every day, so everybody knows what time they need to leave, what they need to have for the shooting. Like, it's an important document in the film industry while shooting. So I was responsible for kind of making final version of them after everything is discussed and delivering it to people. And I became an intermediary between Russian and Chinese crew because I could speak both languages and understand both people. And it was a very difficult, conflictual shooting. There was a lot of conflict, and there was a lot of fighting. And there were a lot of
What do you mean by conflict? I mean, is this like male egos get in the way, or people's egos get in the way, or is it just
I don't know,
interpretation?
It was partly because the people who were organizing it on Russian side maybe did not have enough experience of organizing shooting in other countries.
Right.
Also because Chinese, we had like a big crew. It was about 100 or a little bit over 100 Russian people and 500 Chinese, so it was a big shooting crew. Also, Chinese and Russian ways of work were not always the same, like the perspective, the understanding. Also, there were some money issues. There were a lot of things. So lots of people were fired during the shooting. Like, in the morning, you come to the set and basically you're fired. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Things like this. Sometimes Chinese people, they had like a protest one time, and they were like, in Chinese saying, "We are not going for this to work for these Russian people," or something like this. In the very so there were all types of stuff. There was a material we were shooting on film in those times. They like at the end of it, the Chinese producer kind of said, "I'm not giving you the last week of shooting until you
Oh,
do something." So
jeez.
there was all type of conflicts. I managed to go through all this not being fired, and kind of tried a lot to I don't know, to explain sometimes things to Chinese people, or sometimes to work. I don't know, to explain. I was offered to be promoted to the first AD in the
Right.
process, and send the Russian woman who was first AD. They wanted to send her back to Russia and promote me instead of her. And I said, no, I cannot do this because I don't have this experience. Like you, I also I had to learn things on the go. Like I was supposed to do things which I didn't know how to do, so I
Yeah.
had to learn and to do them at the same time. It was a lot of work. It was like 4 months shooting, I think, in the middle of nowhere in China, and yeah, it was challenging.
Were the other, because you're saying that you're learning a lot on the go, so does that mean that the other people that you were working with from Russia were either from basically a film background or had been working so long in the industry that they actually sort of knew the process more than, more as a job rather than, oh, this is just something I'm doing today?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, most of the people there were professional film crew, or they worked longer. I mean, yeah, I was one of the people who just I was basically it was my first project, so I didn't
Right. I mean, but you were brought in as a translator. You weren't brought in for your film specialty. I mean, it was like
yeah,
you've
and I
lived
had
here,
to
you
learn
know the
it.
languages. We need someone who can bridge the gap, sort of thing. What about the
Yeah.
Chinese crew? Was the Chinese crew at all professional, or was it?
Yes, they were, because Chinese people, they even in those times there were quite a lot of American movies who or some international projects which were shot in China, so they had this experience. And besides Chinese industry, in terms of the number of films they produced, and they still are making every year. Of course, it's incomparable. Like they're making much more films a year than Russian film industry, and
Really?
so
Oh, well, that's because the Chinese market's massive now, and like
yeah, just
they're
because the market is
plugging
so
that
bigger,
need.
so
Yeah.
people get to kind of they have a lot of work there. I mean,
Yeah.
film industry people, just because of the yeah. It was interesting.
So then with your Chinese, you say it wasn't very good. I'm curious because I recently have agreed with a another colleague. She's also Russian from Moscow. No, she's not. Sorry, she's not from Moscow. She's from Yekaterinburg. Um, and we have agreed that at the end of March we are going to go do the HSK4 test.
Oh, you're doing it just okay. Cool.
Her Chinese is far better than mine. When she speaks, you can tell that she studied it in university. When I speak, you can tell that I did not. And so now the big competition is going to be between me and her to who's going to get. She's probably going to get a better mark than I. I just need a 60% to pass level 4. But when you were studying Chinese, did you have any experience studying Chinese prior to that, or was it like you just went because the idea came up at university or something? Why Beijing? Why not, I don't know, Mongolia, South Korea, Japan,
I
Brazil?
have a romantic story, which I mean, maybe is difficult to believe, but that's when I was at the university. I was my university, my major is teaching English as a foreign language. I am
Right.
like, it was my major. And when I entered university the first year, I was very disappointed because my parents, who graduated from Moscow State University, it's the equivalent of, I don't know, Harvard or Yale here. They always told me that university, it's such a place. When you get there, it's like super amazing. You get all these people you talk to. So I don't know, you learn so many things. So I got into my university, and it was a big disappointment because it was not amazing. And like I don't know, it did not have the depth for me. Or we studied language a lot from different aspects, like grammar, I don't know, phonetics, history, but it was all very limited for me. I thought university is somewhere where you get a lot of. So I was kind of disappointed in looking where I can else learn something. And then one day I learned, we had the anthropology course, and we had a list of books to read, and I read what's this Taoism, I think, in English. Tao, I don't know actually the
The Tao,
English.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Taoism is a
So
Taoistic test.
yeah.
I can't remember who wrote it. There's a few people who
In
contributed to it.
Russian, it sounds like Tao Te Ching, but I don't know like it's the main book of
Yeah.
Taoism. And I read it, and I was like, wow, that's so deep, that's so amazing. I would like to know the people like who like wrote this book. How do they speak? Like, what is the language they're speaking? So I got this idea that I want to learn Chinese to understand like how they were able to write such a great book, which inspired me so much. And I found some courses, and these courses, they were free, and they were like governmental courses. So it was 3 years of studies, and then you would get some kind of certificate that you were a certified Chinese, no, I don't know, like translator maybe or something like this.
Wow. Okay.
Uh, yeah, and I started these courses, and then I found out that also they had this scholarship that you can go to China, and I thought like, yeah, I really wanted this scholarship. I really wanted to go to China, so I studied Chinese for 2 years in Moscow,
Oh,
and then
okay.
1 year
All
in China. And then when I came back from China, I had to finish this course. It was 1 more year. So all in all, it was like 4 years. Um, I say I spoke it badly, but I mean, now I don't speak it at all, because Chinese is the language which, if you haven't practiced, and I haven't for all these years, it disappears. It just leaves you.
Oh, don't say
Um,
that. Does that mean I have to keep on reading Chinese and speaking it, even though I will leave China at some
No,
point,
you
if I ever?
continue practicing, because if you don't, I don't think I will ever lose my English, even if I go on an island now. I don't speak it for like 10 years. I don't think I won't be able to speak English. But with Chinese, I understand lots of things, like, this Clubhouse, the app which is very taking up right now. And I found some Chinese speaking rooms, and I switched it on, and I listen. Like, I still can understand lots of things which people are saying, but in terms of speaking, no. But all in all, I studied 3 years in Russia and 1 year in China.
Oh, wow. But then you said your major was teaching English. So
Yeah.
you were doing two languages basically at the same time, studying English
Yeah.
to teach English and then studying Chinese to go study the way of the Tao in China.
Yeah, I also had German as my second language in university.
Of
And I
course, why
also,
not throw in some German on weekends? What else do I have to do? Just pick up this book and learn another language. How far was your German in university?
it was pretty good at some point, because I really invested some time in it. I had friends, and I could write, like, my friends lived in my place, and we communicated in German, and we exchanged letters. I recently found some emails. I said, like, I could write an email in German sharing.
Oh.
When I went to China, I wrote emails in German, like telling them how my life in China is. Not anymore again, because this language kind of also, I haven't practiced it. But languages, they come and go, I guess, if you don't
Work on
support
them.
them.
Yes. Well, I'm
Yeah.
hoping that one of my inspirations for buckling down with Chinese was when I was talking to a colleague of mine who had also studied Chinese at university level prior to coming to China. And he's like, do you want to hit the books for like a year and you just want to focus and you want to get to a point
Mhm.
that within that time, basically you can't lose it. So there is that language atrophy that happens over time, but you want to get to the point you want to study it so much that you can't lose it. And I've found it's very common with all the foreigners that live here in China. They all say the same thing. It's like Chinese language does not pay off at the beginning. It pays off at the end.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like Russian
Yeah,
or
that's
German where
where this end is.
I mean, yeah, you got to spend years developing the
Years.
basics of the language. Only then can you pick up a book and go, oh, that's what that says.
Yeah.
And I actually understand what
How
it
is
means.
like, do you use Chinese now on everyday basis? I mean, in your everyday life, because I know it's impossible to live in Beijing and never use Chinese actually and go by easily. But how much
Yeah,
Chinese?
I mean, I can have basic conversations.
Mhm.
I can make my desires known. Like if I need to buy something, if still talking to some of the taxi drivers, I don't get what they say, but they have accents,
Accent, yeah.
which that's just an excuse because a lot of my failure to understand is vocabulary. It's just that I don't have my vocabulary isn't as wide as it should be in order to have a sustained conversation. But if I was like with my Chinese teacher, when she gives me, a softball, you can hit this one, Steve, you got this. then I can respond in full sentences, albeit a little bit grammatically terrible. But my vocab can shine in that situation. But if it's on the street, you know, someone asks me a question, I mean, I can usually get it and I can stumble my way through it, but it's by no means fluent. It's actually kind of terrible to think that I've been here for this long and not able to produce enough spoken language to actually communicate in a fluent manner. But I mean, I can read a lot. I spend a lot of time reading, so the character recognition has gotten a lot better, and that's helped vocabulary. And as I help the vocabulary, if I read different things, not just my textbooks, but other like books and magazines, that seems to help with the words sticking, and then I can then speak them later on. And I've never really had, I do have issues with tones because Chinese is a tonal language, but that's not why they're not understanding me. They would not understand me because I am either saying the wrong word or I am using a paraphrase, which to me is a sign of success, where I don't know the exact word, but I'm able to talk my way around it. So I'm able to do that a lot more now. But I mean, some of the words I use, they're just like, why would you use that word? Why don't you just say this word instead? It's like, well, because I don't know that word. So
Yeah.
it's been a slog. It has been a slog. And I can't wait until actually, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I mean, you're saying that you've lost your Chinese over time. And I do wonder if I ever left China. I mean, I've spent so much time invested in this language. What purpose would my life have anymore if all of a sudden I was taken out of this country where it's used?
Yeah, you know, I was always saying that the time I invested into Chinese, I think I could learn like 3 European languages in this time and not lose them and have them like on the level much higher than my Chinese. But at the same time, I'm very grateful because Chinese brought film industry into my life and lots of, I don't feel like I lost this time. No, it was a great period. And yeah.
You haven't been back to China since then, though, have you?
No, I have actually once. I went there in 2016.
Okay.
I went to China, like a short visit. I was in Beijing and traveled to what's this? To Guilin and
Okay.
Shanghai, and this. It was just a like tourist travel. I was surprised because so many things changed since my,
What would have been the biggest change? I know what you're talking about, but I want to know what you saw different in that time.
I think the way the China, like all this, the level of life, maybe it was obviously much better for many people. I'm not saying for everybody, but um, and how it has become much more modern. Because in the times when I was there, it was exotic in many ways because it was behind on some things. But I loved it. I mean, it's not for me. It was just like interesting because it's such a different culture. And now, yeah, the way everything was digitalized, the way all these buildings were there. Um, it was amazing. I mean, the people who sold something in the street, like they had Apple Pay and whatever, like all this great. And then I think about Russia, and then I think even about America, where people like still pay cash and know
Yes.
how to do it. And I'm like, interesting how so many people learned so many things in such a short period of time and upgraded themselves on so many levels. This, I think, the also the speed of it. I mean, China is known for its speed, but if you don't see it with your eyes, for you, it's just like, yeah, there is somewhere China where some things are happening. You're not really, you don't know. But when you see it and you know how it was, you're like, wow, I went to Tianjin and the whole neighborhood, my university was not there and the neighborhood was not there. And nothing was there from what I remembered. And it took some like what, 10, a little over 10 years. Everything has changed. I don't know any other place on earth where in 10 years, like the whole city looks complete, like is rebuilt. Not city, one city, but like the whole country.
The whole country. Now, you went to Tianjin Normal University, right? Or
Yeah,
TJU?
yeah. No, I went to Tianjin Normal, yeah.
So is that the one with the big lake in the middle of it?
No, the one, there is Namkai, and it's still there.
That's not
Like it's very famous. And they were across the road from each other. But Tianjin Normal does not exist there anymore. They removed it. I think they brought it to a different place, city, or something, and the whole neighborhood exist there anymore.
Yeah, I've been to both. I mean, I've been to Tianjin a few times, so for work trips and for just for fun and whatnot. Yeah, that TJU, Tianjin Normal, it looks like a new university basically, but I guess they've rebuilt massive parts of. A lot of these universities look new because they just spent so much money rebuilding everything, not just in Tianjin. Like Tianjin has been completely rebuilt. I'm told that it's whatever the pictures you have from 15 years ago no longer apply to the modern city. But I don't know. I mean, I got here in 2014. So it was all big buildings, skyscrapers, high-speed rail. I mean, Alipay, WeChat was just sort of taking off when I arrived. So to me, I didn't see China before it became truly modern China. I almost feel like I missed out. And this is what you people who visited this country prior to the Olympics. I mean, that's a historic moment, basically.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's all gone. I guess now there is a big group on Facebook. I think you remember of it. I think it's called Beijingers Abroad.
Yep, I've heard of it.
It was created in spring, and it was very active in the times of pandemic. And there were a lot of posts there, and I read them, and it was so amazing because it's people who lived in China in different periods of time, and now they don't live there anymore. And I like the things people described, it's not there anymore. And I know lots of these things. When I started in Tianjin, we still had these taxis, Minbao, I think they were called, or whatever, like this yellow, it's like a minivan, which cost like nothing, and we shared it 10 students, all piled up in this strange, like it doesn't exist anymore. It's difficult to even imagine it was there, but it was.
Yeah, we don't travel like that anymore. We have cabs and we have share bikes. I ride bikes all the time now. That's my main method of transportation.
Is it a real bike, or is it like an electric or something? I mean,
the bikes?
Is it like, yeah.
I use a push bike. Yeah, I don't use the electronic ones. I'm afraid of the electronic ones.
A normal one, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I use it.
I will not use the. I'm afraid I'm going to die if I use one of the electric bikes.
That was another thing which really was amazing for me when I came to China. Everybody was still using bikes, and me too. I mean, I used bike for a year in Tianjin. And when I went, and when was it, 2016, everybody used not motorbikes, electrical scooters, or whatever they're called.
Yes.
And this crowd of people, which I remember being a crowd of bikers, like not bikers, but bicycle users. Now it's a crowd of scooter electrical, and they're so quiet because they're electrical. And there is almost nobody who is using a bike anymore. Oh, very few people. I was like, wow, that's also a big change, because I mean, bikes, it was such a big part of China then.
Yeah, a lot of people say that when they came in the 90s, it was all bikes. And then now it's all cars now. Primarily, if you have the money, you basically buy a car. The electric bikes, one of the reasons why they went with the electric bikes is because they outlawed, or they banned gas motors in the city for those motorbikes, because they stank. And it was like, so they said it was an environmental protection issue. It was more because, I mean, those things were falling apart and they were health hazards. But with these electric bikes, one of the problems was that they're so silent. And if you were here in 2016, you would have still been exposed to the delivery people on the motorbikes honking their horns. So they would let you know half a mile away that they were going to be ripping by you very soon. If you didn't get out of the way, you could get hurt. They don't even do that anymore. There's no more honking. There's very little honking anymore. I don't know what changed. I don't know what government policy came out, but the bikes, the cars even don't honk as much as they used to. So in the 6 years that I've been here, that's the one big traffic change that I've noticed, that it's a lot quieter, relatively speaking. It's also a lot more dangerous because you do have to watch where you're walking, because those bikes, they go both ways. They do. It might be a one-way street, but no one's going one way on those streets. They're going all ways. Wherever there's an empty hole, they're basically taking the opportunity to get through. So you're now in New York. You've been to China. You said you could have learned many European languages in the time that you spent learning Chinese, but how is your French these days? Given that we did meet in Montreal, were you studying French at that time um, in an effort to, were you thinking about moving to Montreal permanently, or was that just a stopover like for me? Because for the background story, for those who don't know us, we met in Montreal doing the CELTA course, which is the glorified English ESL teaching certificate that basically a lot of foreigners get, a lot of expats get if they want to continue teaching English to overseas or even within North America. So was Montreal a stopover for you, or was it a serious consideration to live, or was it uh, basically just education and that was it? You were going to get out as soon as you were done the course.
So Montreal actually, no, it was not a stopover. I considered moving there for about I was connected to Montreal for about 8 years because my ex-husband is Quebecois and he lived in Montreal. I did not move permanently there because our relationship fell apart and it did not happen. But I spent quite a lot of time there in the 8 years we were dating, and then we got married. I learned Chinese. I could speak it Chinese. I learned Chinese. I learned French. I could speak it pretty well because he was Quebecois and his whole family they spoke French. And his sister, for example, even though she lived in Montreal, which is like a two-language bilingual city, she could not speak any English. So to communicate with his sister, or his family for that matter, I had to learn French. It was pretty good. I mean, it was not as good as my English because no, English is like my second, I don't know, second native language. I don't even think when I speak English, French, I was not so good, but it was pretty good. I mean, I could communicate with his family quite easily at the end. Yeah, Montreal is a nice city. It's quite beautiful, but it's not my place. I mean, I feel much more home in New York, to tell you the truth.
Is it just because of the X, or is it just the city itself wasn't? Because
No,
whenever. Okay.
It's a beautiful city, and it has culture, and it has a lot of French, by the way, culture, because lots of French people moved there in the last couple of years, not recent years. But I think it was not my kind of place because it was for me too small, too quiet. Though I know that it's not small and it's not quiet by Canadian standards, but I mean by my personal standards, it was not big enough. And I dived into Quebecois culture a lot, and it's a very specific, it's a culture of a certain number of people, which is not so like there are not many Quebecois in my estimate from a person who comes from a big country. They have their own specific perspective on things and their own culture. I know that Montreal has all the other side, like of English-speaking Montreal, which I got to know a little bit, but not as much because I more circulated in the circles of Russian friends, which I made there, or Quebecois people. And I don't know, I just didn't feel home there, I guess. But I do feel home in New York, so New York is just my type of place.
Right, Montreal. Whenever people talk about moving to Canada and they say something like a small city, I go, "Why don't you just go to Montreal? It's such a better city." At least it used to be. I say that because I visited there the first time 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and I thought it was great. But I remember even talking to Montrealers then. They're like, "It's not what it used to be." Montreal had changed in the last couple of decades. I guess since the mid '90s or so, it's sort of more things moved to Toronto rather than to Montreal.
Yeah, maybe Toronto is more active. Montreal was a little bit kind of there. It's a different type of, like, I don't know. New York, I give an example. You can meet people late. There are lots of people for whom, let's say, work is or what they're doing is more important. Montreal struck me as a city where people more like European maybe lifestyle, as I imagine it, where people value their family life. They value their quiet, like, I don't know, the not privacy of their life, but like I did not manage to meet their people who I get better together with, who are like crazy about what they're doing, can work sleepless nights, can not like party outside because no, I mean party too, but just work a long hours, don't stop working at 5 and go home and say, okay, that's my life. I mean, I'm not this type of person, and like in Montreal, I had a feeling everybody is much more not crazy so much about what they're doing, but crazy about their other side of life, which is family and I don't know, kids. And it's not my, it wasn't my lifestyle, and it was not so like I was looking for something like where are all these people who are doing something, creating something crazy about this, working like I was not able to find these people. I'm not saying they're not there, by the way, but just
No,
happened to me.
absolutely. Because with Montreal, we went to the Montreal Film Festival, which has since shuttered its doors. It recently basically
Yeah.
closed up
Okay.
shop, mainly because a lot of the big movies chose to premiere in Toronto rather than Montreal these days. But I remember thinking just how cheap the Montreal Film Festival was. I was like, wow, this is actually kind of affordable. And it was a very global experience in contrast to something like TIFF, like Toronto Film Festival, where it was a lot more big budget, big business sort of movies. And I know that's just a very narrow view of it, but in terms of what you're saying of where are the people who are, live this life, that Montreal is known for, the Just for Laughs festival. It was the film festival before. They had great hockey teams in the past, but I mean, have since sort of petered out. But yeah, I mean, it used to be such a great cultural icon, and it's sort of slowed down, maybe because people just got older. They're like, you know what, we don't need to work so hard anymore. What are we working so hard for? Let the people in New York or Toronto do it instead. We'll just, you know sit here and chill out.
Montreal is very affordable compared to New York. I mean, it's much more affordable. That's true.
I was surprised at how much I was paying $600 a month for my little bedroom. That was very tiny, but it was just down the street from Schwartz and Le Main, the Hand or whatever it is, the two roast beef sandwiches places.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was like right
yeah.
down the street from Saint Denis. I was in the I can't remember what district it was, but it was just a fantastic place to be. I'm like, why don't I just live here?
Yeah,
But
exactly, yeah.
the reason I didn't stay, other than the fact that I wasn't really offered a job, unlike you were offered a job in Montreal. But
Yeah.
I had a job already lined up in China. And when I was talking to people about living in Montreal, they said it's cheap, but there's not as many opportunities to make money. They're just, I mean, your prices are higher, but you're not going to have as many students. Whereas, like if you move to a place like China or South Korea as an English teacher,
Mhm.
you're going to be able to find that much more clientele to work with.
Yeah.
But
And how do you, like you work? You still work as an ESL teacher, right? In China, that's your main.
mostly, yes, we do a lot of language consultation work, basically helping students, clients, people of all ages figure out their English level and sort of guide them in the best way to sort of attain, because a lot of them are going to go overseas and study. So what we do is we're basically just a gateway. It's very, yeah, we are not the final step. We enable them or help them sort of set a milestone in their language journey, and then they go do the university basically because they either have to prove their proficiency or uh, they just want to know what level they are at right now, so they know how much more they need to go basically. And that's all I do. But yeah, it sounds great, but it's kind of can be boring at times. It's not as fun as being in a classroom full of students because we meet a lot of people one-on-one, but I don't miss teaching large classrooms. But recently I have started thinking, what if I could return to that? What would I do? I don't think I'd work with kids. I know that you work with kids, and I did want to talk to you about your ESL business in New York. But with me, I don't think teaching at an international school, first of all, I'm not qualified. Like the CELTA doesn't get you that. You need an actual education degree to do that.
Mhm.
But for me, it would be basically back to a university or a private institution, basically. So we'll see. It is it is a possibility within the next couple of years. I don't know. It's just with things that are happening. This pandemic has greatly tampered demand, but teaching demand is still there. But other services are sort of on the because universities have gone online, teachers have gone online, businesses have gone online, so you need that online presence, that online
Yeah.
teaching, rather than in person. You don't need to employ a foreigner, an expensive foreigner in the country anymore. It could be done a lot online these days.
Yeah, that's true.
But so you moved Moscow, Montreal. Now, were you going to New York at all when we were in Montreal? Were you at all going down to New York? Because I faintly recall this conversation between you and me. Where were we walking? Downtown Montreal, and you had this idea to start a business. And so I'm looking at your website here, this dreammoverscamp.com. This is your business that you started. You've been running it for well, since 2015, it
Yeah.
says,
Yeah.
season 2015. And for
Yeah, I
those,
called it like, to be serious.
and the,
Like,
it's kind of, it's a good creative touch, I think. For those who go to this website, I hope you read Russian because it's all in Russian. I couldn't find an English link, but so you started this in 2015. So I'm wondering when we were talking about this, because we were talking about this naturalized English course where a client would pay for the opportunity to, not unexpectedly, but to know that there was a teacher out there who was going to call them or send them an email, and just for 5 minutes, like, this is what we're going to work on. How's it going? Your basic 5-minute conversation, sort of as like a check-in, but that would be in addition to the courses that you would formally study with. Is this where you were taking this Dream Movers camp that you're doing, or what happened? Where did this Dream Movers camp idea come from?
I don't know. I don't know where ideas come from. I think it was a combination of things, but um, it's difficult to say. Like, I think it's accumulated because I have been teaching English for a lot of years of my life, actually. Because in China, when I studied as a foreign student, I needed some money to travel because $100 was enough for food, but not for traveling. And so I worked there in school for a year and in kindergarten, in two kindergartens. So I taught this Chinese, classes of 50 people in one 45-minute
Oh,
English lesson.
yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. And then I dropped teaching because I worked in the film industry. But then after I left film industry, I went back to teaching. I was a private teacher. And I don't know, I went a lot to Montreal and all this English speaking environment around me. And I always thought like my students whom I teach, I kind of created artificial for them because my students are Russian, as much as I can with my lessons. But this thing, which is so needed, like this environment, how can I bring that to them? I mean, because it's out there. And then in 2014, we had a big crisis in Russia when, like, it was another one of many, when something happened with the
Right.
dollar versus the ruble rate, and like dollar, like ruble dropped down, became very cheap, and I realized that everything I'm making in rubles does not. I mean, I'm making twice as little now in any foreign currency, and so how about my traveling? I mean, like, how am I going to
Right.
pay for my travel? And I think combination of these factors, like I've been thinking, I had some ideas before, like, but this idea worked. So it was winter 2014, 15 when I had this idea. I thought, and I always loved New York. I mean, I was not going to move there at that moment of my life because I was going to move to Montreal, but I always liked New York. It was always the place. I just, when I moved here, finally, I was asking myself only one question: why did it take me 10 years to realize that this is the place I always wanted to live? And like, why it took me such a long time, I mean, to realize this. So I had this idea where I would bring kids for 3 weeks in New York, and use the city as the classroom because the city is the environment. Partly I chose New York, okay, because I loved it, but also I chose New York because it's a rich environment. It has a lot of museums, it has a lot of beautiful architecture, it has all types of people. So there is something there. If I use environment to build my lessons on it, and all the lessons I built on New York. So I mean, then I need something rich. I cannot bring them to the ocean and just let them surf. I mean, this will not work for what I want to do with the kids. So I had this idea that I would bring them. And another idea which I had is that usually camps and language schools, the kids live on campus, and so they get to know somewhat the country if it's a foreign country, but it's not really it's not really the same as if you get to live in the city and experience the city as if you like as if a real New Yorker in this case. And because I had such a, I don't know, vast experience of living and traveling in other countries, I thought, how can I create this model where they experience life in the city, not as students on campus, I mean, which is also pretty great, but my kids are teenagers of 11 to 15, so it's not the age where they can travel like freely around the town by themselves. But how can I reproduce this still in somewhat so they can experience living in the city and not on campus, and like get the environment every day, but still learn something. And that's how the idea was born of Dream Movers. And the name, it's another story how it was born, but in many ways it's like philosophy of my camp, because I also thought that New York is the city where all the people come here to realize their dreams, whatever they are. And this is a good place to talk about the philosophy of dreams and like, what does it mean if you want to do something in life? And I think teenagers is a good years to talk about this. Like, if you want something in life, how do you understand you want it? How do you, I mean, what do you need to do to realize it? It's not just sitting and dreaming. And so my first camp, because I had experience of organizing film shooting abroad. So the idea of bringing kids to another city did not scare me maybe as much as it would have scared other people. I just really, in the film industry, I moved from like translator to director's assistant, but then I was producer's assistant, coordinator, and then I became like, in my last movie, I was like, I had the function of line producer. I don't know what they put in credits, but so I knew how to make a budget. I knew how to make a film shooting schedule. So I had these skills, which were pretty useful at the start of your business, because that's what I did. I counted, okay, if I rent a house and put the kids there and like this number of kids, how much money do I need for 3 weeks? So I made a budget for this. And then I thought, it's fine. The funny thing is that when I got this idea, in my life, I was in New York only 3 days. So basically, I did not know New York, but I thought like, of course, it's like a great city. And what's the problem of, you have internet for all the research and everything. I had like the idea was there. Of course, over years, it became, I don't know, it's now a solid program with certain approach and stuff, but the first time when you're doing something, it's just experimental. And I thought I taught mostly students from upper middle class families in Russia, and I also knew, I think what also helped me with my idea, I knew because I was like very closely communicating with them, so I knew that when their parents paid money and sent them to schools in England, let's say, or in Malta, I knew what were things they were unhappy with, and I knew what they didn't like. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can offer something which will be different from this experience, because I'm not in any way competing with any foreign language schools. It's not, I'm doing something different. So first students, I was selling to the parents of my students. My first client, his parents gave him this trip for his birthday. And he was the first child, and I needed in my estimate, I needed 5 people to make it work. So when they gave him for the birthday, I thought, okay, if I'm not able to sell my program to 5 people, I would take this one guy, because they gave it to his birthday, so I cannot dump him and say, sorry, this year
that'd be
I would
terrible.
just take him, we'll rent an apartment, and I would show him New York. I was so I so much wanted to do it. Nothing could stop me at this point. And so, but then I had in my first camp, I had how many? 6 people, I think. And all of them were either my students, or I used Facebook and Instagram, and I sold it to people. And I was lucky, I think, with the house, because house was a big part of my concept. I wanted to have a nice place. I wanted to show them New York as I saw it when I was first time here and fell in love with it. So it was in the same neighborhood. And I spent hours and hours looking for a house on Airbnb, but everything was very expensive or very far, or not working. And so I found one house, I booked it with my personal money because I mean, I didn't sell it to anybody. I booked it, they transferred money from my card, but I continued looking because it was not ideal. Like I really wanted. And then almost right after I booked it, I saw this ad and the photos were very strange, but the house, there were a lot of books in the photos, which is unusual. Like not many people, I mean, not unusual for New York, now I know, but genuinely unusual for North America to have a lot of books in your house. I was like, that looks interesting. This guy has a lot of books. And so I wrote him a long email. And in those times, 2015, Airbnb was very different. Now it's a business site where people mostly rent, not their real own houses, but they buy, they invest into properties, and they rent them out on Airbnbs. In 2015, it was not the case.
Yeah.
Airbnb was really there as a site where people let other people in their own homes. Mostly, there was no such thing as renting out your secondary or third property on Airbnb.
Yeah, rental properties.
So the idea of letting in a group of teenagers from Russia for 3 weeks into your home in New York also, was kind of like, it was bold because it's your house. You don't know what these people. So I had a very long letters I wrote to people. They were, messages on Airbnb, but basically they were like long messages. I explained my idea like that. I'm sure it will be fine because these kids are all from good families. They all have like big houses themselves and and stuff like this. So so I saw this beautiful, no, the photos were not beautiful, but something there, like I saw books and I wrote the long email to the guy explaining. And I said at the end, I don't know why, up to this day, I don't know why I did it, but at the end I asked him, are you by any chance a writer? And on Airbnb, you don't have until you pay, you don't know the details. So I could not Google him, there was no maybe Google photo search like it is now or something. So I just didn't know. And he wrote back and he said, do you know me? And I said, no, I didn't know him. But it was just a wild guess. And I don't know why even I asked this question, but he turned out to be a writer. He's not a fiction writer, but non-fiction writer. And he wrote, by the way, a lot of books on the USA and China history, because his wife is Chinese and he can speak Chinese, and he opened the office of New York, I don't know what Times or New York or one of these famous media. He was like the head of the office in China because he could speak Chinese. And so it was like lots of interesting things which connected us. And we exchanged, because he's a writer, he writes like long, beautifully worded letters. So I spend hours and hours, trying to make letters look well written in in English, and we exchanged them. And so he basically rented the house to us, and this house became the home of Dreamers Camp for the next 5 years, because we became like friends, and he always rented the house to us. It's in a very good neighborhood in Brooklyn. And and so the first time it was all experiment, which worked well. And then over the years, the program, I worked on the program, there are certain elements of it which work, and I know how it works, and I don't know, it's very, I like my project, I guess. Now it's not there, and I don't know when it will come back.
You're on hiatus right now because of this pandemic that's been enforced upon us. So then when you say there's the elements, what are the elements of your camp? Like, what do the kids go through?
So the elements are New York is the biggest element. It's the city and what it has to offer. And what it has to offer are all these museums and beautiful things here. So the program is built they have lessons in the morning because they are Russian, up to now, they were Russian kids mostly who came to New York, and they want to practice language, but of course not only. So my lessons, I created them all myself, and they're built on everything we're going to do here. So I use the elements and the language and the vocabulary and whatever of the things which are then the things we do. For example, we go to 9/11 museum and memorial, and before this we'll have a lesson about 9/11. So, and then after this we'll have a Dreamers Hour, it's called, in the evening, something when we will close up this team. So everything which is happening to them, there are no lessons out of the books or not connected. Everything is connected to what they live through here, to what they see here. And it's also connected throughout the day, because in the morning they would have lesson with some information, with some words, with whatever. Then we'll go there, and usually in the museums or wherever we go, we have personal like I hire people who do things with them, or it's a personal excursion, like not with other people. So very often it's a workshop where they have to do some things. It's interactive in the museum, and then we have like in the evening a recap where they have like I use a lot of, like, we use creative writing, and they create things, they write, they draw, I don't know, they prepare projects. So I use New York as the everything which gives us material for studying.
Sounds like it's an actually practical school curriculum that you've come up with, something that most classes completely lack, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. So this is one element. Then, and like it includes museums and visiting. The other element is a creative project, and it's either a filmmaking or a theater. Filmmaking because I have this experience, and because I think it's super cool for kids, and because New York is it's a beautiful background for filmmaking, and lots of films, it's just created to be filmed. So we work on the project. We have a person who works with them, but I can guide them through. And it's a very interesting process as well, because we become a shooting, like, I don't know, film crew. They have different roles. I tell them, lots of them don't know what film industry is about. And one of my ideas when I introduced filmmaking was because when I started working in filmmaking, I was like, why nobody told me there's such a whole part of life with, such great jobs there. And I did not know anything. Of course, nowadays, I think most of the kids know more because, I don't know, everything is much more transparent.
Much more
but
connected.
Still, much more connected. But it's one thing to know, and the other thing is to really record the sound on the set for 2 days of filming. It's very different. So they have all the roles which they assign themselves, whatever they feel like doing. And then I tell them that now it's your responsibility, guys. You have to create a film. If you don't, we will not have a film. I'm not. And then I give them the responsibility, and then it's very interesting to see what they are doing with it, how they are going through, how they're dealing with difficulty. So there will be a person who writes the script, they brainstorm, that is, there will be a person who will be responsible for, I don't know, the props. There will be a person who will be responsible for recording the sound. So they have different roles: actors, director, the camera person, and it's a lot of work. Usually we have 2 days of filming, full days, usually 12 hours, because it's never film, it's never shot in the time we plan, especially with kids. And then they realize that it's very difficult. It's work. It's a lot of work. But then at the end, we have a film, usually 5 to 8 minutes. Everything is in English, of course. They communicate in English. They write the script in English. They film in English. And then they have this product which is made here, and it's nice. It's one thing, and the other is the theater, but it's not classical theater. It's improv theater, which is called playback theater. I am myself a member of a playback theater company. On top of all the things I'm doing, I'm also a playback actress, a playback theater actress and conductor. And so when I started doing this playback, I thought, wow, it's great for English learning, because in classical theater you learn, you get the words, you learn this role, and you act it out. Basically, it's great, it develops some skills, but that's only limited number of words you can learn. Improv theater, playback theater, because there are different types, it's very different. The idea of playback theater is that the audience come and they are sharing their stories, and the actors on stage play the stories back. They just listen. There's a conductor who asks the questions, who kind of guides this whole process, and then the actors, without any preparation, without any discussion, they just play it back. So I thought, wow, it's great for English, because you get to share the stories, you get to listen to English spoken, you get to tell your story. And we don't always prepare the playback performance in the time we have, but we do a lot of improv games and a lot of improv exercises, and they are all great for team building, for opening up, for creativity, for feeling more in touch with the language you're speaking, for speaking this language to express yourself and not just so it works well.
So playback, is that an actual theater troupe, or is it like an educational theater troupe? Which way does it go?
Playback, it's a method which has this name, and in the case with the students, Like in the camp, I have a person who has a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
experience teaching playback to kids, to teenagers, and with each group of kids, it goes differently. Some are able, in the time we have, to go from zero to performance, like to playback performance, where they're
Yeah.
able to act out stories. Sometimes we don't, like we can't do it if the kids are younger or something, and they just do a lot of playback exercises and playback dialogues and, like, I mean, improv things, because playback, it's improv theater. So yeah, so this is another element.
Right. Because I was thinking that because you were part of this playback theater group that's based in Moscow as well.
Yeah,
I saw there was
yeah,
so that's where you got this idea to apply this sort of improvisation to
yeah.
the classroom. So are you your playback English lessons, are they this taken at the same time as the Dream Movers camp, or is it two separate elements?
It's part of the Dreamers program. Yeah, it's just some seasons we have filmmaking. So they have these lessons, they have museums, and they have creative project going on all at the same time. It's part of the program. So some seasons creative project will be filmmaking, some seasons it will be playback theater. It depends on the year and on the, I don't know, on different factors. Yeah, it all goes at the same time.
What happens to the movies? Do you ever post them, or are they sort of given to the students and let to sort of be in their
No, they're all
own?
on my site, so you can see them there. They're all, by the way, in English, so people can understand them. They are, maybe it's not like, I don't know, I need to work on the site structure I created in 2007, maybe it's all, but they are hidden in the seasons. Like each
Oh, okay.
season has its own page, and each season, if they produce a movie, it's there. And we usually have the last night of the camp, it's a premiere of the movie. It's when they see the movie for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's usually a very emotional moment, and they're like, "Oh no, no, we don't want to look outside. Oh, how did we make it?" Like usual teenage reaction.
Yeah.
And then we have usually part of our camp is that when in Moscow in autumn, like October or November, we have a meeting with their parents and with them, and they come together, and we, if it was a film, we watch the film on, like, big big screen, and I don't send it to their parents until then. It's kind of a premiere for their parents, and yeah, so we have
What's
this
the parents'
program.
reaction to this? What do they think of it?
No, parents usually like it. We have a very interesting thing is that I think the topics they choose for filmmaking, because they brainstorm ideas and they have complete creative freedom of what they're going to create. And I, from my, like, experience of so far, they use filmmaking in many ways as, like, how to say, to deal with the processes of, I don't know, it's in like our last movie was all about death. So the main characters were kids who left their home, like
Jeez.
they ran away, and there was a killer who kind of killed them. But if you, like, if you go one step above all this, you understand that it's teenagers dealing with the questions of death, with the questions of separation from their parents, but they do it like in the creative form, and they like live through this. Like the main characters are kids who have no parents, or they have very unhappy families or stuff. It's not the case of the kids I'm teaching, but it's the way they kind of deal with their reality creatively. It's very interesting to,
It's a
observe
very
this.
heavy subject.
Yeah, parents have different reactions. In the last movie, I knew some parents would be not so happy with the roles their kids had got to play, and it's they choose themselves. It's not like I say you're going to play this role. I take minimum creative influence in their pros. I just let them. I create the space in which they can create what they need to. And like one guy was, like a corpse covered with blood in the bathroom. And his mom was really unhappy. She thought it was wrong. But I thought, like, yeah, I mean, but this is your son. He chose to play this role, and I cannot bring like this. I mean, it's his choice, and he can do it.
Is there ever a time where you have to say no and sort of guide them a little bit differently? Say, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. I don't want to say censorship, but I mean, is there ever a guiding hand? Like, can we think of something
Yeah,
else
we
instead of
discuss
this?
it for sure, ask them questions and stuff, but there is no censorship, no. I mean, so far I haven't. I think I believe in giving like as much as possible. I mean, creatively, we have rules that, because it's a camp. I mean, there are a lot of rules on everyday basis which they have to observe. But in terms of creating films, no, it's super. It's interesting. They all usually, for some reason, they choose to shoot a lot in the house. Maybe they are inspired by this house because it's a beautiful brownstone 3-storied nice building, and we like they choose a lot of scenes that are in the house usually. I don't know, maybe they're inspired by the house.
Well, it's what they know. I mean, wouldn't it be more familiar to them
Yeah,
than
yeah,
going out to a
sure, yeah.
cafe or something?
Yeah. Though we had to shoot in subway and in pizza places and in the park. What is great in New York, like if you try to shoot in Moscow, you would be stopped right that
Oh,
minute and you would not be allowed to do this. What is great in New York, like you can shoot in subway and we have camera and people and sometimes even like portable light and stuff, and there is no like you can do it.
people like, yeah, it's just another day in New York, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And another, you know, you can create things. Yeah, so it's very intense, you know, three weeks in New York. There is one more, I think, part. So there is this creative project, there are lessons, there is visiting a museum, so they learn a lot of things about New York. And one more part, it's like practical, as I call it. It's we go by subway every day. We go to the supermarket to buy stuff. I mean, of course, I order most of the food, but still, we get to go to the supermarket. So we have like this thing I call okay, what I call it doesn't matter because of the, but like we have a person who has to make a route from where we live to where we're going.
Okay.
And it's kind of it's part of the program. For some kids, it's really difficult. They don't know how to use Google Maps. They were always driven by their parents everywhere. They never been in the subway or things like this. Some like it's, and I think it's a good skill. And so we make sure they have this Google app. I teach them how to find your bearings, how to make route, how to find them, then like this exit you need. And it's part of the program that everyone has to do it. Some people like it and they volunteer for more than once, but some people really struggle with it because they're not used to it, because I don't know, I used to be driven everywhere. And
do they have to use the subway, or is it can be any method of public transportation? I understand the exercises to make your way through the city, but it sounds like you're using the subway because it's probably the easiest, most efficient.
Yeah, it's the most popular way to travel in New York. No, we sometimes take bus, but most of the things here you go by subway. Yes, so that's the way you move around in New York.
Do you ever teach them paper map reading skills, or is it all just Google Maps?
No, it's mostly Google Maps. Paper, not really. But even with Google Maps, they really struggle. Lots of kids cannot read a map. Like they don't understand. If you look at the map and like if you stand, how do you understand where you're standing in connection? I mean, there is a dot there, which helps a lot, but then you need to understand where to move. And what happens in Manhattan, because there are many skyscrapers, your signal very often is, again, it just, you have a signal, but you're going one direction and it shows on the map you're going another direction. It happens oftentimes in Manhattan because of, I guess, because of the skyscrapers, I don't know, or because of the crappy signal generally, Wi-Fi signal in America.
Yeah, see, in Beijing, in China, you don't have that issue. I mean, there's always a good signal. I mean,
yeah, in Russia you don't either, but in America, you would be surprised how these services are behind here, like internet in the home. I'm not even going there. It's like unbelievable for people in 21st century, you know. Yeah, so they like still you need to understand how to go, and for some kids it's a big like they don't know how. It's a good skill.
Crazy. I mean, so you're actually teaching them practical skills that they can actually use. The kids, when they go back to, because they're going back to Moscow after this or back to Russia, do you ever hear from the parents and like stories about how the kids are now behaving? It's like, I can't drive my child anymore. He just took off and took the subway. Or, I mean, is there any sort of independence that's growing?
No, some kids change, and not necessarily the way the parents. For some parents, it becomes a surprise, because when you discover some, like, I don't know, creative freedom for 3 weeks, it can change in teenage at this age. And I had one guy who, he's like I think he's a born businessman. He was like, wait, how old was he? 14 or 13. And he had this idea of selling lemonade in the streets. And again, in Russia, you cannot just go to the outside and sell whatever you want. It's not possible. So he got this idea. I said, yeah, of course. So let's make it a project. You need to understand what you need. Like, are there any other people who want? And they had a group business project, like of selling lemonade. So they invested something, they counted what they need. We stood on the corner of our street where we live, and they made like, I think, $75 in like 1.5 hours. Yeah, people are very generous, and also I think kids selling lemonade, just like it's a thing here. So you want to like make them feel good. I don't know, whatever. So this was very successful. And then they decided, like, there was a lot of, because it was a team project, like business project, there was a lot of, you know, things happening, like in relationship, how they wanted, then somebody dropped out and came back, like, what do you do with this money? So this was very interesting. And this guy, he's very, like, at 14 he read all these books, like, you know, Stephen Covey, Seven Skills of Whatever People. He was very, very motivated, but his family was very different, and they thought all these things were not necessary, not I don't know, whatever. They had a different outlook on his future or whatever. When
Oh,
he came
really?
back, he had a big conflict with his family, a big one for a year. Like his mom told me on the phone, like, if I knew he would change like this, I would not send him to your camp.
No
But I
way.
mean, I took it okay, because it's you cannot control how people change. This is outside of anybody's control. You create the space, and for sure your kid can change in the way you do not want your kid to change, but not in the bad way in this case. He just discovered that, you know, there is a place on earth where you can, like, realize what he was already into it. It's his environment was not like this. So it was not a bad change. It was, in my opinion, it was a good change. But of course, if it clashes with your family ideas, like about what he's also very, he wanted to be an actor, and like he had a lot of actor skills, and his family was not super, you know, for it.
Well, but being an actor is not like selling lemonade. I mean, selling
Yeah, he had all
lemonade,
the
you're
skills. I don't know what he will do in the future. I mean, you never know, but at least he got a taste of different things. And this
right.
for sure is some kind of foundation for your future discoveries of yourself.
The only analogy I could come up with selling lemonade as an actor would be if you're okay in acting in commercials and like being paid for that, because it's the similar, like there's a certain market for it and it's okay if that's what you want to do. But if you have
Yeah,
dreams to take on Starbucks, you know, selling lemonade, okay, yes, maybe in 25 years when your biography's written, we could cite that as the beginning, but there's so much more that's involved in the process of
right.
becoming the lemonade stand that took on Starbucks. Whereas, you know,
Yeah,
it's same with an actor. I mean, you can find work as an actor, and I mean, you're surrounded by them in New York. I mean, people who are just working a job as an actor, doing those little bit parts. But I mean,
yeah,
to make it into the feature films, I mean, it's a very different life.
mm,
It's a very
right.
different commitment of time and energy.
Yeah.
Are you teaching most of the same kids, or do you have kids? Because you talked a lot about the kids coming from Russia. Do you have kids from any other places?
No, I mostly, when I like I teach, I still teach now. It's online, Russian kids. That's my main target audience. When I moved to New York, which happened not such a long time ago, only 1.5 years before pandemic, my idea was that now when I live here, it would be much easier in a way to do my camp, because it's like I lived in Russia and I organized camp here. It was kind of
Right. Okay.
adventurous type of business. But I thought if I'm here, it would be easier to also maybe to promote my camp internationally, because finally I'm here, I'm based here. Like I had the Russian company, I still have it, but I can have a company in America, and then it's a different thing. But now with the pandemic, everything, I don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and I'm just waiting to see, because I don't know when the world will be open and when the kids will be able to travel freely for 3 weeks, you know, from other country to another country. So meanwhile, in autumn, I tried the virtual kind of equivalent, not equivalent, because it's, you cannot make an equivalent
It'd be
of 3 weeks
tough.
anywhere. Yeah, but I tried some kind of, I called it virtual adventures of the remover. So I used videos of New York as it was. I mean, there was Halloween, there was autumn, there were museums were open, so I went to museums and filmed even some things there for them. I used the mixture of this, like some lessons which you can still teach online, yeah. And I used actually playback techniques. I worked together with a guy who is playbacker here, and we did some improv games, because playback theater moved online as well. Now I'm part of my playback theater in Moscow, and we do online performances actually. So it was okay. Um, like I did it. It was a 2-hour session. I did 10 sessions for one group as an experiment. I invested lots of time in it, because making videos and like creating a new thing, it's I mean, you need a lot of time. I think it has potential to grow, because like videos and being here, it's still to some extent and like you can do it 360. Like there are things I can improve it technically and stuff. But part of me is just like I see potential there. I think it can be developed because it was a course based on New York reality, using the videos, interactive, still with creative side, everything which I like. And it let the kids be creative, speak English, learn new things, learn new words, and like it has potential. But part of me is struggling with this because everything is online, and I like being like in
In
real
person.
time with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand that if this reality does not come back, let's say in another year, I really have to like, this is a solid idea and it can work. I know lots of things are happening online right now, and it's also difficult maybe to sell things online. And also what's happening in Russia right now, Russian is a very different place because everything is open there and life is normal.
But New York,
yeah,
capital of the world, closed.
yeah, compared to every other place, it's like very different. Russia chose a different way. They did not close much. Most of my friends there had COVID, so they just like, no, it's just as if it's flu. I mean, everything is open, theaters are open, cinemas are open, museums are open, people have normal life. So for them, this online kind of, it's a little bit strange maybe even because you can send your child to a real camp in Russia. I mean, it's not the camp in New York, yeah, but it's still a real group of kids. They go to schools there, so I don't know to what
Are
extent.
you able to go back to Russia, to go back to Moscow, and who knows, maybe run a 3-week intensive program in Moscow itself?
That's a good question. Technically I am. And by the way, New York and Russia, even in the worst times of pandemic, like in the worst, when in New York, there were worst times when lots of people died. It was always open, like you could always travel between Russia and New York. It was never closed. I don't know why.
Oh,
but
okay.
due to my like status and document situation, I cannot go to Russia right now. And I don't know when I will be able to go back. But yes, theoretically I can go and, run something there. I'm playing with this idea of videos. I think it can be done, and maybe it has potential not only for Russia, but for some other countries as well, because imagine how many kids all over the world would like to travel to New York, but let's say they can't right now, or they can't ever because they don't have enough money yet. And like videos with some kind of interesting program can be like potentially good.
The one idea that comes to mind when you're saying this, making it more videos, is that by giving them an example, you make a 1 minute, 2 minute introductory clip of your neighborhood. You say, this is what it is. You break down all the shots, and you've done that before, and you could narrate over top of it. And then you say, all right, kids, introduce your neighborhood. Same sort of, just find the same similar shots and introduce your area like that. I mean, or hey, get them to start a podcast. Isn't that what people are doing these days? Everyone's podcasting.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think you could certainly survive and thrive even on the online media world.
Yeah, but it needs very different like, I don't know. It's I'm studying here now in like UCLA. It's online, so I'm in New York, but I'm studying in UCLA. I'm doing business studies, and I'm not sure if it's a good or bad idea. Like my initial idea was that I've never had a formal education business, and I've had business, so maybe I can learn some things. But sometimes I feel like it's a bad idea because when you don't know how it should be, you just do things intuitively if you have some business kind of personality side. And when you start learning too much, it's all like this theoretical information, which enters your mind, and you start thinking, oh, it should be done like this, but it's never done like this. Actually, in reality, when you start something, it's never done like this, only if you're not starting a big business, which is like you want all this investment and you go round. So apart from this reality, everybody starts in business somehow. I mean, how they can intuitively, making lots of mistakes and stuff. And sometimes I think that learning, like, I don't know if it's good, it just makes you learn how things should be, and they are never in like how they should be most of the time.
It's always different. So how long is this program that you're taking? Is it a 1 year, 2 year program?
It's a 1 year program, yeah. It's a 1 year program.
Why did you decide to go back to school? You didn't really go back to school. You started going, you've taken an extra program, but you're not actually on the campus at the moment. So what was the impetus behind that?
No, originally I wanted to go to Penn University. They have a master, and I was even admitted there. They have a master, which is called Education Entrepreneurship. And my idea was that I want, it's an interesting program because it's one of the few programs in the whole America, maybe the one and only, where it's entrepreneurship for people who do education. Because the MBAs and stuff, it's all great, but it's not for education business. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very different. And
Those
the
are
program
more
is
for corporate
interesting.
life. I mean, that's if you want to
Yeah,
become a
exactly. And
manager. Yeah.
yes, and it has nothing to do with my reality. This one has a lot to do because Penn is also famous for their education. Like they're one of the leading schools here in terms of everything they do education wise. So I was accepted there, but then like in March, I was supposed to start in summer, last summer, but then pandemic kicked in and they moved online, and with the price stayed the same, and the price is
Ah,
really big. And I
geez.
was like, I'm not gonna pay this money for a year of online education. So I dropped out. No, I mean, I said no, I'm not going there. And I still like I need it because my visa right now, I am here on a student visa, so I have to study in a way. And so I decided, okay, what can I do while pandemic is there? And I cannot study in the university, so I found this UCLA program. It's pretty interesting, and I get some ideas there, but sometimes I'm like doubting if it's. I mean,
Is it
it's a
the
good idea.
same? Is it a similar program, or is it very different in
No, the
terms of
other
its
in
aims?
Penn it was masters, and in UCLA I'm doing like it's called certificate program. So it's
Okay.
a program with a number of courses for people who want who are working already and they want to either change their career or get some more like knowledge in certain areas. I'm doing business administration with the concentration in entrepreneurship.
But nothing focused on education, which is what the
No, nothing. And that's, I
university.
think, the element which is missing for me big time. Because I mean, business is nice, but lots of things like business and education, it's still business for sure. If you're a bigger tech company who is selling like tons of everything, but the education element is interesting too. I don't know, when this program is over, I will see what I will be doing. Everything is changing now in the world. You have to adjust. Everything you planned, it does
Oh,
not work the same way
it's
as you planned. So
yeah, it's vastly changed. So then, with your Dream Movers, is this part of a larger educational company empire that you're trying to set up? I mean, or is it because when you're saying that with the masters, the MBAs, they go and work in corporations, usually to look at venture funding, to list on
yeah.
the stock market on a stock exchange. Is that something that you'd be looking at, or are you still looking to keep sort of smaller groups, more personalized education, or how is that going to work for your school?
I don't know. I think after my education, especially, I don't want investors funding. I don't have these ambitions of building an empire. And also when you have investment funding, very often you lose the empire. That's where, because you give the part of the company to other people and business starts dictating like what you need to do. No, I want to keep it small, but I wanted to grow it to a certain level, like have not one, let's say, or two sessions a summer, but have more running at the same time. And then I had the idea that like my other growing would be in the world before pandemic, doing the same thing, the same model in other languages, because it's a replicable model. Like it's a certain model, what you do with kids for 3 weeks, I have certain principles. It's kind of a program which works in certain ways. So it can be done theoretically in French in Paris or in Spanish in I don't know, Barcelona, or in Chinese in Beijing. The
Yeah.
idea is, yeah, I need a big city. That's a city with a lot of environment, with some museums, what I can build my program on. And then after this, it can run. I mean, small groups, I would keep that. I would not like living in the houses. I would keep that, though it has certain difficulties for sure. It's easier to put the kids on the campus than to keep them in the house, but that's, or in the big apartment or something. But that's the idea of my program.
So you'd be
Not
teaching teachers basically, is you're certifying sort of a methodology of education of
something, or
intensive study.
maybe franchising. I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't know that, but I had these plans like it would be somewhere in the future when it would be
Later,
easier to do that.
yeah.
Yeah, later. Having a company in based in America than in Russia. I mean, it's much more easier to do anything international based here. So that was my plan. Now I don't know anymore. Right now I don't have such a plan. I just living and waiting to see what will happen in the world. Maybe develop this idea with the virtual thing. It might be interesting.
Well, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, this is awesome to hear that you've been able to basically move so many times around the world, and you've set up your own business, I'm sure a lot of people would be looking at you going, how did she do this? And it's an amazing feat that you're able to handle, juggle all these things that are going on. And especially since, I mean, New York City being shut down right now, and now you're making that transition, and it's probably a very painful transition because all businesses are going through this squeeze into the online world. It's like, wait a minute, we used to deal with people face to face, and now we can't.
To bring children to New York, now we have to show them New York, through the window of the video. Yeah.
But let's be fair. I mean, a lot of them we're going to watch YouTube movies anyway, and that's how we experience a lot of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it would work in Beijing if you ever decide to set up shop here. I'm sure you could find someone who would do it. I know that a lot of China has cracked down on its English teachers recently, so they want people of a certain education level, and they all have police background checks and everything. So it's one of those things. I'm sure there is a go getting Chinese individual or even a foreigner in Beijing. Not that I'm hinting anything, but in terms of setting up a similar school here in Beijing, or Shanghai would probably be another place that would be a good place for
it. The Chinese language is much more popular now. It was not then, but now lots of people over the world are learning Chinese language. And yeah, I think it could work. I mean, it was one of my ideas, but let's see what the world will bring us. In terms of moving, yeah, I don't know. It sounds very exciting, but when it happens, it's part of the life. It is exciting, but also it just happens to you, I guess it's a big change, really. Yeah, when you move through cultures and through, languages and places, but it's interesting. It's the way of life. I don't think New York, I don't have a feeling New York is the place where I'll I don't know. I think it's one of the most. I'm sure I will live somewhere else as well. It's just
where else could you go? London?
I don't know, but life offers, different things. I did not know, by the way, I would live in New York. It's funny. I always thought I would live in Montreal. I didn't end up living there, but
I didn't think I'd live in Beijing, and yet here I am 6 years later, still here. Kind of surprised.
Yeah, actually 6 years, it's quite a long time. I remember our CELTA course, and it was just the beginning of stuff.
Yeah, that was an interesting, it was a good course. I learned a lot, quite a bit. Yeah. All right. So if people want to get in touch with you, where do they go to follow you and get in touch with your services, what your online education services?
I have a Facebook account and Instagram. The problem is it's all in Russian because I mostly write for Russian people who are my clients, or just for Russian people. So Facebook, Instagram, and yes, I have a site, which, as you rightly said, is not translated into English, which is a bad thing, I guess. But there is Google Translate, now when you open the site, you can say translate this site, it translates pretty much.
Yeah, it translates automatically now.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess my site, my Facebook page, and my Instagram would be the places.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Is there anything else that people should know about what you're doing and what we should expect from you in the future?
No, I think we have discussed a lot of things in this amount of time. I'm very grateful for your questions. It's interesting. I don't often do it's actually my first ever podcast. So thank you very much for inviting me. I have one more coming end of February, but this is my first. It's very interesting, I think, to talk about your life and you get a perspective yourself where you're like, oh wow, really, I moved so much, because in everyday setting you just do things. You don't look at it like this.
Yeah, it's well, when you move around the world, it becomes the stress of moving sort of takes away from the amazing feat of actually moving, especially if it's intra-country, abroad, and whatnot. It's the stress of getting through the customs channel or the visa channel sort of takes away from wait a minute, you moved from there to there? How did you do that? Well, it was a lot of visa applications and form filling and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that is a big part of it. Everybody who is listening to this podcast, you need to know that this is a big part of changing countries and things. It's a lot of paperwork, but in exchange you get I think, I don't know, it opens that's why I wanted this camp for the kids, partly because when you get a chance to live in another culture and speak different language, you become a bigger person inside. Like that's for sure. It lets you just see things from a different perspective. That's
All
what I
right,
think.
good stuff.
Thank you very much for
We'll
this
leave it there.
question.
Thank you very much, Anna, for joining me today. I'm sure people will love this conversation, and they'll find all the show notes on my website, stevensersky.com. But
Okay.
that's everything.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you very much. We'll talk again. Okay, bye bye.
Bye.
All right, so that was episode number 20 of my podcast here. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen today. I will have all the show notes up on my website very shortly, stevensersky.com. And of course, you can find all the links for Anna Bass there. Check out her website, dreammoverscamp.com, which is in Russian, but hey, we live in a modern world. It's not 2008 anymore. You can Google Translate these things very quickly if you need to, if you want to. But certainly, I'll have the links to her website, her Instagram, and her Facebook for you guys to get in touch with her if you need. Thanks again. We'll talk again. Bye bye.